hard truth.
What? I'm not going to be fed to anything, Daniel shouted. He was already confused, but now he could add shock to the mix.
That was the wrong way to put it. But just like all that came and went before, you might be the next the Celestial to choose. Until now, Daniel had been calm about this situation, given the circumstances. Echo found it easier this way, but now she could see that part was over. Most likely, it was due to how she explained things. Echo wanted Daniel to return to a calmer state. However, she wouldn't sugarcoat the truth either. This makes no sense. Daniel yelled, exasperated. Why me? I'm nothing. The others you talked about were all important people, like soldiers and scientists. I'm just a... He trailed off, not knowing how to finish the sentence. Who was he, really? I can't even remember. Why can't I remember my life before this? The Celestial takes your memories and then offers them back to you. We still don't completely understand all this. To be fair, there have been different scenarios, but that doesn't mean there isn't a pattern. You see, after the army chaplain was taken and the Celestial took a new form, there was a case of this happening again. It was a divorced couple. No one knew at the time because they kept that hidden from us. By this point, we had already established protocol against too much familiarity. They wouldn't have received approval to work together if we knew about their prior relationship. They did everything to avoid being in the same room together. They didn't talk. They were placed in separate units for the excursions. She went first and almost immediately lost her memory. When the ex-husband heard about it, he went to the Celestial to look after her. But as you may have guessed, he also lost his memory shortly after the breach. When we tried to evacuate them, the Celestial changed. The tunnels changed the rooms, and we had no way out. Only after we were ordered to leave them behind did the Celestial allow the rest of us to go. It was like we were getting in its way, and it didn't seem to like that very much. We monitored them, and when they finally found each other, neither one remembered the other. It was like that for days. That's when we did our research and discovered their prior relationship and what ended it. They had a child who was killed 2 years prior. Their marriage didn't last too much longer after that. It was pure coincidence that the two were recruited for the assignment. But somehow the Celestial knew. We lost visuals and never saw them again. Dr. Rainger has been obsessed with recreating that exact scenario. Echo stopped talking. Was she done telling the story? Daniel frowned, disappointed that he still hadn't had his questions answered despite how fantastical everything he had heard was. So that's it. My wife is here, and the doctor set all this up so he can use me in some experiments? Well, fine. Where is she? I've been seeing and hearing her for days or hours, so why haven't I? I told you, the Celestial takes your memories and then offers them back to you, but you have to accept them. Echo repeated those same words. Perhaps she was trying to imply something, but all it did was make Daniel angry. You say that like I don't want them, and you're wrong. Unlike you, I don't know who I am, and if somebody can tell me, then I would want to know. Echo's eyes widened at Daniel, except they weren't at Daniel. When he turned, he found that the doors had returned. It towered ominously in front of him. If you want to know, was all she said. At that moment, his words were like ice in his lungs. Did he really want to? His hand inched toward the handle. He struggled against the weight as he pulled the door open. For just a moment, he hesitated but couldn't stop. Just as before, a large beam of light erupted until he was inside, all without taking a single step. When the light subsided, he could see that he was no longer at the field with Echo anymore. Instead, he was inside a house. No, his house, he remembers that now. In his kitchen, the flowers in the blue vase sitting along the table. They were her favorite. He gave those to her. He could see her soaking in the sun just outside the patio doors. Jennifer, Jennifer, he yelled. His body moved toward the door, but his hand passed through the handle. He screamed her name again and again, but she never turned around. What can I do? She won't even acknowledge me, Daniel thought. Jen? The voice came from behind him, his voice. When he looked, he saw himself entering the room, button-up shirt half tucked in, chewing on half a piece of toast. Jen? Daniel, I'm outside. Come look at this. She stood on her toes, arms stretched to the sky. Can't, running late as is, Mark called in, so I have to cover for him tonight. So, rain check on dinner tonight? Daniel said, swallowing the last bit of toast. Do I have a choice? She replied. A little look of sadness could be seen on Daniel's face. Do me a favor? And don't wait until it could be all night. Don't worry about it. They needed another nurse for the graveyard shift anyway. Originally, I said no, but might as well. Looking at the past, Daniel thought he could see her smile, but couldn't be sure. Hey, it's the American dream, Daniel said as he headed to the door. It was all Daniel could do, but watch the surreal moment as he watched himself walk past himself. That's when it finally started to sink in. This was it. He could remember this moment, but couldn't remember Jennifer's face because he never saw it. He would never see it again. Don't leave, he cried to his past self. You won't get this chance again. He wouldn't listen, so Daniel thought that a little force was called for. He jumped in front of his past ego to block his exit, ready to smack him to the head. But it went through him when he did strike, just like the door handle. In fact, his entire past self passed right along through him, out the door. The day became night before the door opened again. He already knew he was on the other side of this the first time around. He hoped he was wrong, but when he saw his former self again pass through those doors, he knew what had happened. Jennifer, you home yet? He called out. Usually he would have called, but that day he couldn't. He looked over to the kitchen table and saw his cell phone. He'd forgotten it that day, but only realized it too late. Oh, there it is. 10 missed calls. Daniel started to sweat. What did he miss? First contact Jennifer's work, 4 missed calls. Police department, 2 missed calls. What? The phone rang again, the vibration almost causing a drop. 3 times. Hello? Yes, this is the what do you mean incident. The memories that were just out of reach before rose to the surface. The call from the police, him going to the hospital where she worked, but had to be there to identify the body. It all came back. Someone had done this. A monster. He was told that it was a mentally ill patient who became paranoid that he was being experimented on by the staff. When they tried to calm him down, he took one of them captive, Jennifer. Nobody stopped him. Why did no one stop him? He had questions. Everyone had questions. Why wasn't he there when the murderer was sentenced? Why did he never return anyone's calls? And why, after 3 months, did he step into traffic? And what made him stop? You understand now, don't you? Echo's voice was so soft that Daniel didn't realize he had returned from one reality to his previous one. A fog had set in, and the green meadows, now covered in mist, made it impossible to see far in the distance. Slowly, Daniel nodded. Yeah, I understand. I know why you, doctor, wanted me here. You said it's the connection, right? Something emotional? Right, so you remember? About Ian? Echo said softly. Sure, he's the monster that killed my wife, Daniel said coldly. Echo nodded and went on to fill the gaps Daniel might have had. Yes, he was declared insane, and somehow the doctor arranged for him to be brought here. He had always intended to lure you here, but after your suicide attempt, it made it that much easier to arrange for your transfer as well. Echo paused in case Daniel wanted to interject, but he said nothing. She wasn't sure if it was the right time to ask, but she had to know. Now that you know, what will you do? Before now, he could never imagine wanting to hurt someone this much. But the more he thought, the more he felt it made complete sense. Sure, maybe he thought about it once or twice in between the funeral and trial, but he was so numb to the whole thing that he couldn't even get angry. But now it was different. It was what he was brought here to do, right? With his eyes closed, he could see the two faces, the one belonging to his wife, Jennifer, and the other to Ian. Just a short time ago, he was beginning to see Ian as a friend, which somehow worsened it. Daniel felt his heart nearly beat out of his chest until it became calm. He knew what he had to do. He opened his eyes and could see Echo was still patiently waiting for his answer, so he thought he would give it to her. That's a stupid question. I'm going to kill him.